This question stem is what we categorize as miscellaneous questions. I mean, it doesn't fall neatly into any of our preset categorizations of question stems because it just simply asks us to most logically complete the argument. Well, that could be done in any number of ways. It could be asking for a conclusion, could be asking for a premise, could be asking for, I don't know, really anything. But this question in particular, question three, is testing your ability to make arguments by analogy, because that is a very, very important legal skill to have. Most legal arguments are arguments by analogy. We analogize one case, one set of facts to another set of facts, and we say they're relevantly similar, so therefore whatever precedential judgment was passed on this previous case, we should pass it on our current case, or we say it's not similar, it's very distinct, you distinguish it, so therefore whatever precedential judgment had been passed on this case, do not apply it to this case. Of course, depending on which side of the argument you're on. But anyway, so a century in certain ways is like a life. Okay, so that's you have to catch this. A century is not like a life. A century is a period of time. A life is, well, okay, it's a period of time too, but it's a life. Life is organic, biological. It's not like a century. But yes, but in some ways it is like a life. See, that's what happens when you do analogies. When you make arguments by analogy, you take two things that are really quite different, and then you zero in on the part that is similar, and we talk about just those things that are similar. So okay, so you have to keep this in your mind. This is what they're analogizing. A century is like a life, and as the end of the century, so end of the century, end of the life, right? End of the century approaches, people behave towards the century much as someone who's nearing the end of the life. Okay, so end of century now being analogized to end of life. So people's behavior towards the end of the century versus people's behavior towards the end of their life. Just as people in their last year spend time looking back on events of their life, people at the century's end, what? Spend time looking back on events of the century, right? That has to be how this analogy finishes out. People at a century's end look back on events of the century, reminisce about their own lives. No. Fear that their own lives about to end. No. Focus on what the next century. No, that's like looking, if they had said like at the end of their life, look towards, I don't know, whatever religious belief they have that dictates a future afterlife or something. But that's not what they're saying. Become very interested in the history of the century just ending. There you go. Reflect on how certain unfortunate events of the century could have been avoided. But that's like if they had said, just as people in the last years spend much time looking back and thinking about how they could have prevented the regretful events of their own life, people at the century's end, then you say E, and that would be right. You see, you can sort of do this. You can make C analogize to this, make E analogize to this, right? So do this question backwards, so to speak, to just get extra practice.